Welcome to the Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello and welcome. I can't believe we're here for the third time already. We're coming to you live from Middletown, Connecticut, the land of 1,000 volcanoes. This show airs every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time with live call-in video shows every first and third Mondays at 1 Eastern, although we got thrown off by Labor Day this month. You can watch or listen to the show on the live stream syndicated online. You can find the show on your mobile devices or in your cars by saying, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 radio network. You can get the Dream Visions apps, or you can catch us on podcasting networks that include iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and more. To learn more, to find our full schedule, and to see our show archives, please go to dreamvision7radio.com. And of course, this program is still preferred by 4 out of 5 dentists. My guest for today's show is a gentleman and friend of mine named Jim Vinoski. I think Jim and I first connected on LinkedIn and found out that we sort of shared philosophies and senses of humor to some extent. So, Jim, I am so very glad to have you on with me today. Thank you.
Well, Mark, thank you. I'm thrilled to be on with you.
You know, I was thinking about the million or so things we might talk about while we're here today. Yeah. But I was thinking about the fact that if people observe other people, and especially if those other people have accomplished particular things, they're not likely to think about how those people they've been observing got from here to there. They're likely to think about there. How did they get there? Mm-hmm. But I would actually like to start our conversation today talking about how you got where you are today from where you started. So I know something about your career in manufacturing, but I don't really know all that much about your upbringing or your young family life. And I'd really love to hear that story.
All right. Well, yeah, start with the start then. I'm the 5th of 7 kids in my family. My dad was a forester with the U.S. Forest Service for his whole career. My mom was a homemaker till we got old enough to be self-sufficient. Then she came and cooked us lunch at our Catholic school cafeteria.
Wow.
I grew up in a town called Ironwood, Michigan, which is way up in the Upper Peninsula, just off the shore of Lake Superior. Very remote. We were the biggest town for miles and miles, and we had 8,000 people. So definitely not a big city kid by any means. Grew up playing with my brothers and sisters and all our friends and running around town and doing the things, you hear about these days, nobody doing, being out all hours during the summer till dark and basically being off on our own full time. And so, yeah, kind of got a real sense of independence growing up. When I finished high school, let me back up a step. I got big into bicycling while I was a teenager, and that actually led me to my college career. Wanted to go into mechanical engineering because of my interest in the mechanics of the bicycle. My next older brother went into electrical engineering. He graduated 2 years in front of me, and he went at the behest of our both parish priest and high school guidance counselor to a college in Memphis, Tennessee called Christian Brothers University. And when I came along, kind of the same nudge, and my brother was down there already, so made going 1,000 miles away from home a little easier. And off I went to Memphis, went to school, got my degree, and then, that was long before bicycles were really a big thing in the US. So It's not like I was going to get a career in anything bicycle related. So looked at what the folks were recruiting for on campus and in my degree, and wound up going to work for a chemical company in the middle of Mississippi. And
So given your backgrounds, you and your brother must be the guys who invented e-bikes.
he was also into bicycling, so it's not outside the realm of possibility. But no, actually, I'm not a huge fan of e-bikes. I guess I should be a little accepting of them, because at least they get people outdoors, and folks who are unable to pedal like I still do can get on a bicycle. But at the same time, these things zipping around at 20, 25 miles an hour with an inexperienced rider make me a little bit nervous when I'm out riding.
Yeah. I didn't intend, I still don't intend for this conversation to get carried away by
Nope.
cycling, but I'm going to tell you two things. I am always astounded at cyclists who don't follow what I consider to be, fundamental cycling etiquette.
Yep.
And I've done the Cape Cod Bike MS Cape Cod getaway a couple times. I can't even tell you how many ambulances are called during that thing. And the other thing I will admit to you is that the expression, it's like getting on a bike.
Yep.
It's not.
Right.
In 2016, I put 3,500 miles on my bike and didn't get on it again until a week ago yesterday.
Oh boy.
I rode 2.5 miles and I was shot. So I'll be spending more time in the saddle, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, and I highly recommend it. I rode 65 miles on Saturday.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Make me feel bad.
Well, I've said many times, if I weren't blessed with this absolute love of cycling, something that keeps me fit and burns off all the beer I drink, I'd probably be as big as a house. So I count my lucky stars for that.
Well, yeah, there is that. And I can tell you, I don't know if you've ever done a bike MS event, but the folks who suffer from MS and support that ride are incredible. It's 2 days, it's 100 miles a day, and the course is absolutely lined with people with walkers and wheelchairs and all this stuff. And to be conscious to the point of thanking God for healthy legs is just an amazingly humbling experience.
Yep, for sure.
All right, I want to go from your career in manufacturing, which was how many years?
35.
And I don't know precisely the connection, but now you are a columnist for Forbes. I have to presume those two things are connected. Right. If manufacturing was point A and Forbes is point B, how did you get from A to B?
Yeah, so I wound up sticking with industry, bounced around to some different kinds of things. Like I said, I started in chemicals. I went and did paints and coatings for a while. I did food ingredients, and then wound up doing lots of different kinds of food. I was with General Mills for about half of that time, and did bourbon for a while. That was a lot of fun. And so I've got to see a lot of very cool things bouncing around in industry like that. But going back to high school, when I graduated, I actually had two paths I was considering. There was the engineering one that I chose. The other one was English teacher, because I always did exceptionally well at English, writing, everything. And, wound up going with the one that seemed like it was going to be a little more lucrative, but never got away from that love of English and writing. Everywhere I landed, I would do some sort of writing, whether it was doing a newsletter for a bike racing team or doing a publication for General Mills that was kind of unapproved, but my own take on things. I was always writing. And then about 5.5 years ago, I was on LinkedIn, where you and I met, and where I meet so many excellent people and see so many cool things. One of the cool things I saw that day was a recruiter friend of mine shared a post from a fellow recruiter out on the West Coast. And she said, I'm doing a favor for a friend. She's looking for someone who can write magazine length articles about manufacturing. Here's my email address. Send me a note if you're interested. I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I could marry up the two things I've always enjoyed so much.
Yeah.
And so I shot her an email and said, hey, here's my background, why I'm interested, and love to hear more. And within an hour, she came back and said, well, I've looked at what you have posted online. It looks fabulous to me. So I'm copying so-and-so at Forbes, and you two can take it from here. And I just thought, that's just stupid. That's not going to happen. But before I could even react myself, I get a note from the woman at Forbes, and she says, yeah, I've looked at some of your stuff and it looks good. Why don't you get me some samples of things that are more, aligned with what we're talking about? And then let's get on the phone next week and we'll chat. And so I sent her some samples of industrial typewriting I'd done, and we set up time, and I got on the phone with her and talked with her for 45 minutes. And at the end, she said, yep, it's great. I'm sending you a contract.
Wow.
Hand of God, I always say.
Well, it makes me think of, and I still read quite a bit of things, quite a number of things about imposter syndrome. I'm not exactly sure I believe in imposter syndrome. But I'm going to guess that the prospect of doing that, and especially of being contracted to do that, must have been scary.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure that all of us face times like that. How did you take that one on? I mean, you must have thought, well, I'm not sure I could do this, and contract is a big commitment. How did you think about that?
Well, the woman who had responded to the email, who became my first editor, helped out quite a bit, because she made it very clear the kind of stuff she was looking for. And she talked about the things that I'd written and how some of it fit and some of it didn't. She spent some time with me later, kind of going over the journalism side of things, because I'm no journalist, and that's kind of the type of writing that they like at Forbes. And so there was help along the way. But then too, it was pretty clear that they struggled to get people who could write about manufacturing, because, most technical people aren't really well known for their writing skills.
Yeah, well,
and so
true.
I learned pretty quickly there was kind of some leeway there around, I'd put my writing up against anyone's, but again, journalism skills, not so much. And so they're willing to work with you to get that technical expertise on board and, give you time to work into the journalism angle. It was scary going in, but honestly, I got pretty comfortable pretty fast.
You and I have had conversations about writing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that we've had any particular conversations about storytelling, but I have found you to be a really good storyteller when, you've written about incidents from your young life. You've written a story or two about your dad.
Yeah.
I wonder if you approach your articles for Forbes from the standpoint of storytelling, and I wonder if the people that you speak with for those articles respond to, if you do look at it that way,
Mm-hmm.
if they respond to the opportunities to tell their stories.
There's definitely a storytelling element. What I love to do, and not all my articles are this, but my favorite kind of article is that feel-good story of a manufacturer out there doing whatever it is they do excellently, providing a good that people will pay more than what it takes to make it by some really good people who are making it. And they'll be very happy with what they acquired. I always say manufacturing is the crucible of the business world, because you can't hide. You're either making stuff that people want to buy at a price that's going to keep you in business, or you're not. And if you're not around for very long. And so it's just one of the things I love about the manufacturing world is people putting themselves up against that test, and some just amazing people you never hear of. One of my favorite stories is from up north of me here in Michigan, a company called Astor Brands that's this now going into its 5th generation ownership family business. And folks who started as farmers and then had a wild hair about doing some wood stuff, and they kind of screwed up and got a veneer machine and wound up going into the veneer business. The big part of the company is guy was just wanting to do a retaining wall and couldn't find what he would build it with. And they were at the time doing concrete and stone. And he said, well, I'll just make up my own, kind of cultured stone retaining wall block. And they built their own retaining wall, and people saw it and said, yeah, I want that too. And it winds up being their Ready Rock business, which is kind of the mainstay of their whole corporation. And they're still up there in this resort area where you'd never think, there are manufacturers. It's all tourism and beaches and beautiful, northern Michigan scenery. And they're plugging away doing their now veneers and plywoods and Ready Rock stuff and all sorts of amazing things.
I was in a conversation, I believe it was last week, and two gentlemen wanted to discuss the relationships between, or differences between, disorder and chaos. And that sort of got into a whole other thing. Sure. And I was thinking during that whole thing, the chief challenge I think that we all have in life is contending with uncertainty. Because if you think that you know what's going to happen, and especially if you think you can control it, whatever it is, you're probably going to find out you're wrong. And whether you succeed or fail at anything will largely depend on how you respond to being wrong. And another gentleman spoke up, and he was talking about innovation. And he was saying that we should not imitate people that we consider to be successful innovators. And he cited Elon Musk and a few other people. And it occurred to me, and it just occurred to me again when you were talking about these guys in Michigan, that if we are indeed living with uncertainty, and we are, the best we can do is the best we can do. And in doing that, and in our determination to do the best we can, sometimes we either stumble on or get in the way of something that turns out to be a terrific idea that we probably didn't understand that there was a market for. And when we succeed at that, somebody's going to say, wow, that guy, whoever it is who succeeded, he's an innovator. He might not be any more an innovator than, the guy next door. Yep. He just found it, or it found him. It makes me think of those guys. I'm willing to bet they'd probably say the same thing.
I'm sure. Yeah. That family story of kind of stumbling into the veneer business, for example, is certainly where they made the best of what otherwise could have been a really bad situation.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hear what you're saying about not wanting to copy, but I think copying can be a huge benefit. We're not all good at everything, but there are things that we have to be at least passable at. Think about, for me, I never liked to ask questions. I would have done much better in school, and I did okay in school, but I'd have done much better if I didn't think I was supposed to know everything. And I would ask my teachers questions instead of just staying quiet. But I have a friend who I noticed years and years ago, we're together, and he's just constantly asking people questions. And so I made a conscious decision. Okay, I'm going to copy Bill on that. When it's in my mind, I'm not going to step forward and ask that question. I'm just going to be Bill and do what he would have done. And I'm still not great at it, but I'm a lot better than I would have been.
Is there is there some in deciding I'm going to be like Bill? Was there a little bit of depersonalization in that? And what I mean is, if you acted like Bill and you asked the question and it was rebuffed or something, were you then inclined to take it a little bit less personally?
I never thought of it that way, but absolutely. Yep.
I actually stumbled on that realization once. I think it might have been maybe around 2008, when the economy was in a complete shambles.
Yeah.
And I was experiencing the first meaningful dip in my business. So I thought, okay, I probably need to get a little more serious about this. And I started using a CRM system.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, wow, if I come up with 10 or 15 suspects to put into this system, I'm going to be doing well. And I ended up with about 150 or 200. And so then I don't want to say automated, but I became much more routine in sending out feelers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That completely depersonalized the whole thing, because actually, I'm not sure if I should say I didn't have the time or I didn't have the temperament to take every one of those things, every rejection or just being ignored personally.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy doesn't like me. That guy didn't know me, right? And, I don't like the idea of turning people into numbers. But if you're working a database of 200 or so prospects, they're numbers.
Yep.
And so I just wondered if that experience of yours might have been similar in that way.
Yeah, that's actually very insightful, because like I said, I never considered that piece. But yeah, there had to be an element of my not wanting to ask questions, of, having that fear that I might look stupid or be rebuffed, like you said. And yeah, so now I'm Bill. He doesn't care.
I hope Bill doesn't watch this. Damn that, Jim. All right. I think this is probably the perfect time to take our first commercial break. Okay. We'll segue into the next topic when we come back, and we'll see you shortly.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life, from any circumstances, a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Welcome back. I was thinking during the break, Jim, I was thinking about what you were saying about feeling stupid, and being afraid to ask questions. And I want to ask you about two things. One, what the environment was like, especially given the number of siblings that you had in your family growing up. And if you think that maybe your reluctance to ask questions came from that, or was it simply a matter of your own temperament?
Well, the environment was very irreverent. I can tell you that much. My siblings and I still constantly abuse each other, now mostly by text. And there was certainly an element of not wanting to be, the butt end of any of their jokes, or the aim of the torrent of abuse. But yeah, there's definitely also a piece of it being my own temperament and the way I am. Just I have also had to overcome shyness and introversion, and those things certainly don't help when it comes to putting yourself out there and asking a question where you think you're probably supposed to know the answer.
I want to come back to your shyness and introversion in a moment, but I want to ask you about your two sons.
Yeah.
Because I know you have two sons, and I know at least one of them, I don't know if both, is not only involved in scouting, but has done really well in scouting. So I wonder how you think about that. I wonder how you think about parenting, and I don't know if there's anything like a parenting style, but could you share some of that? And especially, I, for one, don't hear a whole lot about scouting in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just an incredibly admirable thing. Could you talk about that a little bit, and how and why you thought it was important, and why you think your son appreciates it so much, or sons?
Yeah. I talked about how I grew up, and I actually was never a scout. My two older brothers both were in and out of scouting, never really stuck with it. I think to some degree we were too busy doing our own thing. We got more into sports and things like that. So I didn't have the experience myself, but I grew up in a place where we were naturally in the outdoors all the time.
Yeah.
I was just talking to a friend of mine this past weekend. We lived where other people went for their summer vacations or their summer weekends, or winter. We were in a big skiing area too. And so I certainly had that value. I remember long before my sons ever came along, reading a story about parenthood, and it made the point of, if you have sons, then you make sure to get them in scouting, because if you want to raise kids with a moral compass and an ability to handle themselves, there's no better place to go. And so I filed that away. And when my older son got, to Cub Scout age, we were lobbied at the school by the local pack and signed him up. And first meeting, the leader of the den said, I need an assistant. So I raised my hand and became a leader from there on. And certainly my experience has been that, especially in today's world where kids default to the screens, they don't get outside that much. It's become that much more important for the outdoors piece, but then that moral compass piece is where the real value is. And I think as a nation, we've fallen away from religion. We've fallen away from even a common set of ethics. And so having a grounding in, not necessarily a specific religion, but a faith-based organization that has very set standards of expectations of behavior and, just having that reverence, that duty to God that we talk about all the time, I think is just critical in today's society. And I think the boys definitely both appreciate that they had another place to be outside of school, outside of home, outside of their circle of friends, where it was both, setting those expectations and instilling good habits and good ethics and morals, but then also a heck of a lot of fun. In scouting, you still teach the kids to build fires and play with knives safely. And where else do they do that in society anymore?
Well, at least legally.
Right. And, even though you'll be in with parents who have very different politics, very different home situations, very different ways of living, you're all coming there voluntarily for that program, for those very things. And so it's one of those few remaining places where people with those differences can still come together with common values and accept those other differences.
Wow. This is, sorry, I just got it. This is why I love this program so much. No, seriously, because we can have these conversations and things that would never otherwise occur to me. So most of what I was just hearing you say had to do with things like discipline. Yep. But it seems to me that there's a whole other side to that coin for the scouts and the parents involved. For the scouts, there's an opportunity to discover, however you want to term this, the fulfillment, the reward, or something from achievement.
Absolutely.
And I was never, I'll say I was never a successful scout. My next younger brother and I kind of bailed early.
Yeah.
But I have the sense that there's some imagination and creativity involved in the way those achievements can be accomplished. Does that occur to you too? Does that appeal to you?
Yeah, and in a couple of ways. There's just the run of the mill kind of everyday scouting where you're going out and you're doing campouts or you're doing outdoor activities together. And one of the big values of scouting is that the adults aren't there to lead. The adults are there to support. Scouts are there to lead. And you've got formal leadership. There are roles within the troop, leading the whole troop. And then we have subgroups called patrols. You have leaders of each patrol. But then there's also informal leadership and people who just know how to do things. We encourage them, those kids, to help the other kids along and teach them, train them. So there's this whole element of scouts helping each other and, some of them rising in different ways to be those leaders, those kind of shining stars of the program. Then there's also the ranks. And so through it all, they're working through set in the troop of a set of seven ranks. Pretty much everyone knows the top one's Eagle. Most scouts start at age 11. And so they're spending 7 to 8 years going through these ranks, going through the program, campouts on weekends, summer camps, troop meetings, earning at least 21 merit badges, which is kind of a focus study in one particular area, and then getting these ranks. And to get Eagle, then they also have to come up with an Eagle project by themselves. I mean, they can get help certainly, but they're responsible for deciding what it is, organizing it, getting support, both people support and money if they need it, and then executing it and documenting it. And just had an Eagle Board of Review yesterday. One of my scouts got Eagle. As of yesterday, is officially an Eagle Scout. My older son is also an Eagle Scout. And what I tell my scouts is, there is exactly one thing you can do when you're your age, that if you have it on your resume when you're my age, it still matters. And it's not captain of the football team. It's not the 4.2 or whatever GPA they can get nowadays. It's none of those things. Eagle Scout is the only one I know of where if it's on a resume when you're in your upper 50s like I am, I'm still going to care as a hiring manager, because it demonstrates that for years, as you know, a very immature, young, not even yet teenager, you started a process and you carried through it till you were almost at adulthood and delivered the goods and documented it and got it approved. And, you know, now you're an Eagle Scout for the rest of your life, something no one can ever take away from you. And I think that's something certainly my older son who made it is appreciative of and understands. My younger son just last week got his Life Scout rank, which is the one before Eagle. He is 15 years old, so he should be very well set. In fact, he told his board of review for that rank that one of his goals is to achieve the rank of Eagle earlier than his brother did.
Nice. Oh yeah. The second son is just competitive as all get out.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to touch on was that the parents also have the opportunity, especially given what you said. Everybody's got different backgrounds, different faiths, et cetera, et cetera. But you're coming together for the sake of your sons. The most important aspect of being, of course, that you're coming together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of what's wrong with the world at the moment is that we're not not coming together. And, you know, you were talking about scouting being an alternative to kids spending time on screens. We're on screens and, you know, we're shooting all this stuff at each other, but we don't ever stop that long enough to say to somebody, look, I know you're completely at the opposite end of whatever spectrum we might be talking about. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think what you think? Why do you believe what you believe? There's a guy, he may be on this program at one point. Until he is, I won't mention his name, but
Okay.
Politically speaking, we are polar opposites. And we were having a conversation on the phone one day. And he said to me, you do know, of course, that if you and I were in Congress, we would get things done. And I said, yes, I know that. And it's because we care and respect each other enough to talk to each other and to make it a deliberate point to work toward that middle where we know we can agreeably meet.
Right.
Is that part of your experience too, as a parent?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I know for a fact, I've worked with some of my fellow scout leaders who were just like your friend, diametrically opposed politically, but we had that shared value of what scouting brought our kids.
Oh, man.
And who cares what someone's politics are if you share that value and you're there to, number one, help your kids develop into the best human beings they can be, to achieve the best they can do. But then you're also there somewhat for yourself, because along with developing those kids, you're further developing yourself. I mean, I certainly became better leader, better manager through my experiences in having to help kids along and get kids to do things that they may not have wanted to do, and showing them the value of, you know, sometimes it's tough being in the outdoors. It's cold or wet or hot and uncomfortable, but it's still worth it. And so there are, I think, universal truths that our partisan politics are kind of trampling on, and they're dividing us, like you said. And that's, I agree with you. I think it's one of the absolute disasters of modern life is that we have almost no community anymore.
And what's especially, I don't know if I should say troubling or ironic or both about that is, and it's to a point you just made, I don't think it matters who we are, but any two people can find one thing they share.
Yep.
And once you find that one thing, then everything else just kind of ripples out from that, because you've established that shared connection, and because you then tend to care more about the person with whom you share it.
Right.
So part of your agenda will be to discover what else you got. What else can we agree on here, right? There's got to be something else. I want to ask you one more question before we have to go to our next break. And this is on the subject of what you characterized as your shyness.
Mm-hmm.
And I share this, by the way, reluctance to ask questions. So one of the things that I discovered ridiculously late in my life is that there is always help if you're willing to ask for it. It's there. You just need to ask for it. Do you think that in the opportunity scouting provides for young men to achieve, that one of the gifts is the ability to recognize there is always help? You characterized it as support if you're willing to ask for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting because so many people look at Eagle Scout, for example, and think, wow, what an amazing individual accomplishment. And it is, the individual has to go through everything I just talked about a little while ago, but it's also something that is never going to be accomplished solo. Mm-hmm. It's not possible. And my older son shares some of my characteristics around not wanting to ask for help. And I banged my head against the wall a million times with him over school in that regard. And then when it came to getting his Eagle, and we're kind of in that final rush to get his project done, and I'm helping him quite a bit, he made a comment about, I don't know if I've really earned this. I got so much help. And I said, John, that is the only way you are going to earn it. It's impossible to do it by yourself. It is literally not possible. It is a requirement of Eagle that you get help on your project and that you document that help. And I think it's a huge part of the message of scouting is there's individual accomplishment and you can do great things, but you can't do it alone.
I don't know when this happened, but there was a point in my life at which I guess I had aged to the point at which when I met or learned about a remarkable young person, I thought of that person's parents. And right now, when you're telling me about John, what I'm hearing you describe is a remarkable humility. And that's making me think about you and your wife and what amazing parents you must be to have instilled that humility in him. I mean, if you ask me, and I know you didn't, that humility is as rare as anything else anymore.
Well, I appreciate it. And that just makes me think of my own parents and my parents-in-law. And you're right. It's another piece of what we're sadly losing is that part of that division is also the fracturing of us into just these individual units and people thinking that, yes, I know it all. My thoughts are best. Everyone else is evil. And that's no way to run a society.
No. And sadly, I think we're proof of that. But there is hope.
Yes.
We're going to take our second break right now. And when we come back, we're going to start with that hope.
Good.
See you shortly.
Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brand's distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life, from any circumstances, a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Oh, everybody's having trouble hearing me. Sorry. I typically say to my wife that when I get in my car and I don't have the keys in my pocket, I just can't start the thing. So I have a similar experience. When I turn my microphone off, I don't know what happens, but people just can't hear me. So before I remembered to turn my mic on, I was saying that I didn't expect cycling to come up in this conversation any more than I expected scouting to. But one other thing occurred to me while you were talking about scouting. One of the things that I love to think about, and it first occurred to me when I was 28 years old, because for the very first time, I drove over the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. And I thought I would love to have been in the first meeting when somebody said, "Hey, you know what we could do?" and everybody else in the meeting must have said, "Are you completely out of your mind?" But I was thinking when you were talking before the break, I wonder if somebody in the first scouting meeting said, "Hey, you know what we could do? We could get a whole bunch of adolescent boys together and have them voluntarily engage in this discipline and accomplish things." That is remarkable.
Yes.
Given the sort of general reputation of adolescent boys, and I haven't forgotten that I was every inch the adolescent boy when I had the chance. What do you, does that strike you as being as extraordinary as it strikes me?
When you put it that way, yes. It's interesting as you go through the program because, you know, you start in the pack and you're starting with kids at kindergarten age, and obviously they're not leading at that point. It's totally adult led. But as they progress, then you work more and more on having the kids take on that leadership. And by the time they hit the troop at age 11 or so, you know, they're in pretty good shape. And yeah, they're not even adolescent yet. And yet, you know, it's one of those things where you talk about, if you set the bar low, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And if you set the bar high, you're not always going to get there, but you'll be amazed at what people can accomplish. And it's every bit as true for adolescent boys, despite their
well, and
proclivities.
I happened to see something online this morning about neuroplasticity. And, you know, I would love to talk to a neuroscientist to find out if there's actually, because people always talk about how differently adolescent brains are wired.
Yeah.
But I wonder if there's some influence that beginning at that early age in Cub Scouts and working up through Boy Scouts actually has an effect on the way adolescent brains, I don't know, respond, get wired, something like that. I wonder about that.
Yeah.
So I promised a segue from hope, and it seems hugely hopeful to me that there's still a scouting program and that adolescent boys are still doing what they're doing. But I also want to talk about what you're doing, because you now have a consulting business, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Share a little bit about that with us. And let me know if that was scary in any way. I mean, I can tell you for me, when I started my own business, it was a huge and truly terrifying step.
Well, but there's a difference because you jumped off whole hog, right? Whereas I just started this side business. I'm actually still working in the manufacturing world. I don't publicize my current employer. So we keep, you know, the two sides of my life separate because I have this public persona that may not always agree with what my day job might think.
Yeah, there is that.
And so the consulting is actually mostly focused on writing for manufacturers. And so I've discovered along the way that uniquely people in the industrial world struggle to find people who can write about what they do because of the technical nature and needing to capture that and convey it in a way that everyone can understand. And so that's what I try to bring to the table. And certainly it's still nerve-wracking because, like anything, you're risking failure. But in my regard, it's less of a concern because it's not putting the food on the table. But, you know, it's something where down the road, when I decide to retire from the full-scale manufacturing, then I plan to have that built up to be what I do.
When I started my business, and I'll just tell you, I started it at age 50, and was truly terrified. The only thing that scared me more was the prospect of waking up at 60 if I hadn't tried and having to think, come on, what if you had done it?
Yeah.
Does that ever occur to you? What if?
Yes. And it's really part of why I've been willing to do crazy things like, you know, also start my web show and podcast. And now I'm taking that live on the floor of a trade show next month. And it's, you know, you hit those things where people say, hey, can you do this? And you're like, well, I've never done that before, but I don't see why not. So let's just do it. And then you got to go figure it out.
Well, yeah,
asking for help thing, right?
but I think that's very much akin to what I was asking. So let's just say somebody asks you to do that and you say, well, I've never done that before. I can't. Wouldn't you be thinking, what if I had given it a shot? What did I have to lose?
Yeah, it's certainly a piece of everything I've done is, even like sending that email for what became the Forbes opportunity. It would have been very easy just to say, I'm not a writer. I've had a few things published, but this woman's looking for a writer, and walk away. And then I'm sure I would have looked back and said, man, I wonder what that was, and if it could have amounted to something.
Yeah. A woman asked me one time, she was apparently very taken with Simon Sinek and his whole start with why thing. And I'm not, but that's,
I know that about you.
But she said to me, if you had to explain your why in 5 words, how would you do it? So I'm a writer, so I cheated and I hyphenated, and I said, I write to restore self-faith. So those were my 5 words. And then I said, and I don't mean mine. And so in listening to what you're saying, I'm thinking, if we all believed in ourselves just that much more, what would we accomplish? And
right.
And beyond that, why shouldn't we believe in ourselves that much more? What happens? I wrote a piece once wondering, do we give it up, or is it taken from us? Or is it both? What do you think?
It's both. I think, well, in some regard, you're always giving it up, whether it's taken or you give it away yourself. But there are certainly forces in our society that say, take the easy path, go to work for the man and collect your paycheck and go do your other stuff separately. And I do think that you can internalize those messages from society, but then there are people who just, encounter the same thing and don't reach for the brass ring. So I don't know. I'm sure I can look back in my life and see times when there were opportunities I didn't take and wonder about those. But the way I try to live my life is, okay, be willing to fall flat on your face, because who cares?
Yeah. And, at least in my own experience, the best lessons I continue to learn are the hard ones. And, flop once, but carry that experience with you. If people are interested in finding out about you and your podcast and your consulting business, where can they find you?
All right. Well, so manufacturingtalks.com. That's my podcast. It's got links to my Forbes articles. It's got a link to my business, which is cosgrovecontent.com also. And just search for my name. It's pretty unique. So you'll find me.
Okay. And am I right in thinking that especially people who don't want to teach the language of manufacturing to somebody else and need content developed should probably reach out to you?
Yeah. You have something that you're trying to convey to people, and you're struggling to find someone who can do that, give me a call.
Okay, excellent. Jim, I'm so glad you agreed to join me today. I know that was a risk.
Not at all. I'm honored to have appeared with you, Mark.
As a pilot friend of mine who once took me up in his single engine amphibious plane once said to me, as we landed and he reached across the cockpit and shook my hand, we walked away from another one.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. Maybe we'll do this again sometime. I hope so.
Well,
and for everybody else,
I'm getting my show live, so we'll get you on there.
All right. I will definitely check that out. I'll try to be ready.
Okay.
And for everyone else who joined us today, thank you very much. We'll actually see you next Monday. Thanks to Labor Day. See you then. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment.